welcome you watching The Big Picture with me, Neha Khanna. Are BJP governments in certain states running a bulldozer over the due process of law? On the occasion of Ram Navami on the 10th of April, the Khargaon area in Madhya Pradesh witnessed large-scale communal violence. Stones were allegedly pelted at a Ram Navami procession, following which there was rioting and arson, with scores of homes, shops and vehicles allegedly belonging to one particular community being set ablaze. The very next day, the Madhya Pradesh government issued orders that homes of suspected rioters be demolished. Bulldozers were sent to at least 50 homes and these were razed to the ground. No show-cause notices issued, no warnings given, no evidence formally collected, no approval of the court sought. No time given to these individuals and their families to even remove their belongings from the homes that were brought down. Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan declared that the perpetrators of the communal violence had been identified and would not be spared, and that the cost of the damage inflicted on public and private property would be recovered from the rioters. The Indore Commissioner said the government has a zero-tolerance policy in this matter. Many have asked, under which law has the Madhya Pradesh government demolished people's homes? How can you pronounce someone's guilt without them even facing a trial in a court of law? Isn't this dangerous vigilantism by the state under the garb of swift justice? Isn't this a populist measure adopted by certain governments to win over and appease a section of potential voters while running roughshod over both the law of the land as well as civil liberties and citizens' fundamental rights? But the Madhya Pradesh Chief Minister is not alone in this. Remember, it was Uttar Pradesh Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath who started this practice of sending bulldozers to allegedly illegal properties and razing them to the ground. This earned him the sobriquet of Bulldozer Baba, a term that seemed to resonate in the recent Uttar Pradesh elections where the BJP and Yogi Adityanath won a historic second consecutive mandate. Many are asking, after the Bulldozer Baba of Uttar Pradesh, are we now looking at the Bulldozer Mama of Madhya Pradesh, a reference to Chief Minister Shivraj Singh Chauhan, who is often addressed as Mamaji. In fact, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh and Uttarakhand, all BJP-ruled states are proudly pressing into service bulldozers to demolish houses of alleged rioters and land grabbers. Many legal experts argue that this is a crime being committed by the state against citizens whose fundamental rights are being trampled upon. So how exactly are these governments getting away with this? Is it because the judiciary has failed in its role as a neutral arbiter, meant to keep the executive in check, hold it accountable and ensure that all actions of the political and administrative executive are in consonance with the established law? Is the silence of the courts emboldening these governments and their babus? In some cases, the judiciary has cracked down. In February this year, after a rap from the Supreme Court bench of Justices D.Y. Chandrachud and Surya Kant, both future Chief Justices of India, the Yogi Adityanath government in Uttar Pradesh had to withdraw 274 recovery notices and proceedings initiated against Anti-Citizenship Amendment Act or CAA protesters. In fact, the Supreme Court observed that the Yogi Adityanath government had acted like a complainant, adjudicator and prosecutor when it unilaterally decided to attach the properties of the accused, most of them belonging to the minority Muslim community. The court asked the state to refund the crores of rupees that it had recovered from the alleged protesters without following due process. The apex court, however, allowed the state government to prosecute the accused as per the provisions of the Uttar Pradesh Recovery of Damages to Public and Private Property Act 2020. The act provides for setting up of claims tribunals to investigate the damage caused to public and private property by individuals during protests and to award compensation. But since that order, the judiciary has been by and large silent on the brazen manner in which the law of the land and due process are being bulldozed by several state governments with impunity. It is important to note that there is no law on India's statute books that provides for or approves of bulldozers being used to forcibly bring down houses or business establishments of the accused, whether they're accused of being rioters or stone pelters. Despite that, the governments of Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh and Uttarakhand have begun this dangerous trend of making a grand spectacle of using bulldozers to send out a message, as arbitrary as it may be, to the alleged violators of the law. Not only houses and businesses, even the law is being bulldozed in the process. Why are the courts, especially the high judiciary, not showing any alacrity to check this government high-handedness and serious breach of the law by the state? Now, Pawan Sharma, the Divisional Commissioner of Indore in Madhya Pradesh, claimed that the main purpose behind the demolition move is to instill the fear of financial losses amongst the accused. Doesn't this mean the government's actions, however illegitimate, will be a fait accompli by the time the judiciary gets down to examining their legality? Will the government compensate the accused or rebuild their homes if they are proved innocent in court? Not one word on that from the government. Representatives of these state governments claim these actions have legal backing. Nothing could be further from the truth. When some cite the 2009 judgment of the Supreme Court with regard to the destruction of public and private properties versus State of Andhra Pradesh and others case, they argue that the apex court has allowed recovery of the cost of property damaged in protest from the protesters. But what they ignore is the fact that this judgment does not talk about destroying an accused's property to teach them a lesson. Also, we need to ask, how will demolishing homes of suspected rioters compensate for the loss, if any, caused by stone pelting? The Supreme Court ruling certainly does not suggest that due process be consigned to the dustbin, even as it does say that the burden of proof shifts to the accused, who has the duty to prove their innocence, to disprove the prosecution's claim that their actions caused damage to public property. Before the accused is expected to prove their innocence, the prosecution has to first successfully prove that public property was damaged due to the actions of the accused. Those who enthusiastically support bulldozer politics and the so-called quick-fire justice that it supposedly dispenses are conveniently forgetting that there is a good reason behind the adage, innocent until proven guilty, and that this is the cornerstone of the criminal justice system in most of the democratic world. How do Western democracies deal with rioters? In the United States of America, the Federal Anti-Riot Act was passed in 1968 in the wake of the 1967 clashes between the police and black protesters and uprisings following Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination. States and cities across the US adopted similar laws and ordinances. Over the last decade, governments have used riot charges to dissuade protests against indigenous land theft, police brutality, and other issues faced by people of color. But never have we heard of anyone's property being demolished. Let's now take a look at European anti-riot laws. A judge convicted a man and a woman involved in rioting in Rotterdam in Netherlands and sentenced them to a prison term. Demonstrations against COVID restrictions degenerated into violence, with police firing at rioters who started fires and threw rocks and fireworks at officers. A woman was handed a 5-month sentence in prison after being accused of throwing rocks at police cars and also ordered to pay 1,000 euros for the damage she caused. So yes, every country has its own set of laws to deal with cases of violence and rioting. In some cases, fines are imposed, in others, prison sentences handed down once the guilt is established. It is nobody's case that there should be immunity for lawbreakers. But equally, how can there be immunity for our lawmakers who are turning into lawbreakers in the name of law enforcement? It's important for the courts to remind themselves that it is their constitutional duty to keep the executive in check and remind them about the laws of the land in cases of brazen intransigence by the state. Else, we would be in serious danger of governments becoming the mob. Unfortunately, bulldozer politics seems to pay rich political dividends, and therefore, unless the courts step in, the bulldozer, it seems, is here to stay.